Today's episode is going to be with Caroline O'Leary, and in the interest of transparency, I guess I better state, which I do during the episode, that Caroline O'Leary is in fact my sister. And what Caroline talks about today is her experience as a single mother of a teenager with ADHD and the trials and tribulations of that. What you'll notice in the episode is that it's a little emotional at times, and there is a point at which Karen says, "You can edit that out, right?" And I say yes, but after we discussed it later, following the recording, and when she watched it herself, she felt it was much more authentic to actually keep that piece in it. So I want to make sure that you understand that I did not ignore her instruction. This is something that we both discussed, and she is happy to have it in there. So yes, make sure you're in a nice quiet space and you're not feeling delicate, and enjoy. Caroline, in the interest of transparency, what I want to say first for anyone who is listening, that you are my sister, and that was intentional, making sure that we have you on this, because we've talked a lot about our experiences with regards me discovering that I've got ADHD and you discovering that my lovely niece has ADHD. And it's been a long few years. And I know that you've talked about your experience in your workplace, and I know that I've talked about your experience and my niece in so many different places. So I thought, why not share it here? Because I think it's an important experience to share with people. So I just wanted to let people know that you are in fact my sister. So there might be a different tone, I guess, to this. So no making faces or calling me names, or telling anybody anything about who I was or what it was like when I was little. I was awesome always. Isn't that right?
Absolutely, 100%. Yep. Mm-hmm. That's for another podcast.
All right. Well, I guess I haven't intentionally named her on this. I refer to her as my niece so far because I don't know, what she'd be comfortable with and what she won't. And we don't have to. In this case, it's entirely up to you what you're comfortable with. But as your mother, a single parent, to a teenager that was diagnosed with ADHD, where for you did you start to think, got the temptation to think something was wrong, which isn't
I know
right, but where something felt like it was different or she was being treated differently? I'm using words that I've heard you use, but where for you did this search begin as such?
Yeah, I don't know really, to be honest. I couldn't put a pin in it at what stage I noticed anything different or noticed how she was responding to me was any different to any other kid along the way. I think you flagging it was probably the first time, when you started to explore it for yourself, it was probably the first time we really looked at it for Grace, because you could see sort of stuff that reminded you of your childhood. Yeah. When you were a teen, or, that kind of stuff. So you spotted those early on, whereas I wouldn't have, because I knew you as a teen, but I didn't know you as a neurodiverse teen.
Yeah.
So I couldn't. For me, I'm getting upset. Like, can you edit this bit out?
Yeah, I can. I thought I would, but I can. It's fine. It's going to be, because you're going over, and it's me. I always make you cry anyway.
I know. God almighty, could you just put something in your place for a minute? I'm fine. I'm great for him all day.
I know. It's going to be therapy.
So we'll just get her, like, I think she looking forward to this. Yeah. So, anyway. So, I didn't notice anything different. I don't know.
I think it's the way that I'm wording the question that's making it difficult, because what I've been asking you is, when did you think there's something wrong? Which is what people will ask me. When did you first think there was something wrong? And I think what happens then, I mean, I'm a parent of ADHDers as well, but I feel as an ADHDer, I somehow view that, I think I view that differently. Sure, hell, I look at everything else differently, so why wouldn't I look at that differently? But I do feel that stab when people say, well, when did you realize, like, when did you see the symptoms? When did you spot the
Yeah.
problems? They're all negative words that are associated with the difference of being neurodivergent as opposed to positives. And I think it's perfectly normal for any parent who cares at all about their child to feel defensive and emotional about that. It'd be nearly weirder if you weren't, because, you know, what I literally asked you is, when did you notice that she wasn't normal? Like, that's a rough phrase to use, and that is what's being used. Like, but I guess you said that I flagged those things first. So I guess for me, like, I was diagnosed at 43, I'm 45 now. And it was through the research before the diagnosis, getting the diagnosis, the boost afterwards and feeling validated, that I felt it's almost like somebody lifts a veil, and I almost felt like I got this superpower where I could see all the neurodivergence everywhere. And I was able to look at her behavior because I was now medicated and can concentrate on one thing at a time. But I was able to see the things that she was struggling with and go, oh, I remember feeling like that. And I remember doing those things. And then I think when it came to you and I, like, nobody wants to go to a parent and go, hey, your child's different.
Yeah.
But because my experience of getting a diagnosis was celebratory, like, it was really, really positive. And Grace had a very tough few years figuring out school and life and everything else, and the pressures, all those social pressures that come with it. Then I think it was nearly a relief to share that information with you. Does that kind of make more sense of it?
Yeah. Yeah, because I never had any idea that it was a terrible thing or it was a negative thing. Or I know growing up we wouldn't have seen it a lot. There was no diagnosis really, and I suppose growing up we would have been under the impression that it was kind of a negative thing, or that, you know, he doesn't think the same as us, or he's a screw loose, or whatever the case may be. During the 80s and 90s, that we would have looked at somebody that was, you know, a bit hyperactive, they were troublemakers, or that kind of stuff. That's the generation we grew up in.
Yeah.
So
it's all sugar and bad parenting, Caroline.
Yeah. So I never thought
we were all well screwed long before now, because I'm pretty sure I was raised on a 90% sugar diet in the 80s. Like,
all the Z numbers that were banned now, that we ate them on. But I never. So I suppose subconsciously or unconscious bias had me thinking that it was a negative thing. But then see you go through the process that you went through, and for it to be such a positive thing, and for it to be such a positive outcome for you, kind of
makes all the difference, like, doesn't it? It's okay.
Turned it on its head, kind of. You turned everything you know, kind of, on its head. So you don't think it's such a negative thing, or that you're going to be disadvantaged, or, you know, picked out in a crowd as being a bit odd, or you don't see that so black and white anymore. It's very different, and for everyone involved, it's a very different experience. For me with a child who's been diagnosed ADHD, or for you yourself being diagnosed with ADHD, or our parents with our family and all the diagnoses of ADHD. So it's a different experience for everyone involved.
Yeah.
And I think it's good that it is more of it's looked on more positively now than when we were growing up. But there's a lot of work to be done, I think, in that space too.
Yeah. And even with our parents, like I've mentioned this on some of the earlier episodes as well, like they're of the, you know, loads of sugar, not bad parenting, because they were the parents with loads of sugar caused it, you know, and it was just things like that. But I remember when our younger brother found out then, and the response was not very positive to that diagnosis. So you and I spent about a year solid, and this was before my diagnosis, schooling them pretty hard on how they need to look at it. And I think by proxy, you kind of end up schooling yourself in some ways too, with regards to those biases that you talk about. You start to realize, hang on, do I look at it like that? And I think what caught them by surprise is that, like, our brother has a really nice career. He's doing really well. He looks after himself. He's got no goals to be out there in the forefront of the world. He's happy doing his thing. But I'm much more gobby and out there, and everybody knows what it is that I'm doing. So when they found out that I was diagnosed, I think the reaction was like, hang on, but you can't be successful and have ADHD. That's
Yeah,
not possible.
which
And
is
that
what
was
we
where the real
grew up
schooling
with.
began.
Mm.
Yeah. And when you've got, like with my children and you with yours, then I think for me, then that makes me realize that it's not a sentence for them, a negative thing necessarily. Now we've gotten to it early enough to manage it and to learn more about it and understand and help and encourage and
Mm.
do all those things so that they can be successful because it's possible. Like
But
I
even
think
for
that
us to believe growing up that every brain worked the same is crazy to me now.
yeah,
It's just nuts. There's no way. The brain is so complex as well. Like, and everybody's personality, hormones, everything that goes into how you think, feel, react, speak to people, communicate, everything that goes into that. There's no way that two brains are the same. And then you have
no,
in your class, you've got these mathematicians that are just excellent at algebra. And then you've got, in my case, me, who didn't know what X or Y at all stood for. So you've got, like, that's two brains working very differently. So how did we ever think that two brains were going to be the same? Like, and that's all it is. Not that
yeah,
that's all it is, but essentially, when you break it down, it's just your brain just works differently.
yeah,
That's so normal. That's, and I use the term normal as in that should be how we see people. That everybody's
yeah.
brain is different. Of course, it is. That's a no-brainer.
But tish, it's it's so. You're right though. It is that actually that simple, and I think only when you spend time looking into it all and finding out all the information and being surrounded by people that have it, do you start to realize that it is in fact that simple. I don't
Mm,
need I don't need to put months and years of training and learning into understanding how
mm,
to support people that are neurodivergent. I just need to listen to them. Like
mm,
I'm in a house that's surrounded by the house isn't surrounded. I am surrounded by people in my house who are neurodivergent and math freaks, and I am not
mm.
a math freak at all. These lads with their advanced math and physics and
Yeah.
whatnot, I listen to it, but
Mm,
I couldn't do it. Like so, like you say, even that we're all ADHDers, but
mm.
definitely there's no similarities in our brains in that sense. Like
No, and even giving people the autonomy to tell you what they need. Like,
yeah,
giving people that kind of empowerment to tell you what they need. So if it's one need for Grace is a different need for you, is a different need for Joe up the road. So to give people the freedom to say, well, that doesn't work for me, but this would really help, I think nearly validates their experience and how their brain works, because they're telling
yeah,
you, this is how I work best, and then we accommodate for that.
yeah.
And it's different for everybody. So I think, yeah.
And a big blocker for that is people assuming like, oh sure, this will be fine, or you can have what everybody else has, because that's been what we've been up against
Mm,
all the way through till now, and still in many cases now too. So it's almost like a trigger. I know it's the kind of thing that would,
mm,
if I had a need for something and asked for it and that was the response to it, I think I'd definitely be triggered by it, because hang on now, I've done it the hard way for 43
yes.
years.
Yeah.
I now understand what it is and I now understand what I want. And you're going to tell me I need to keep doing it the hard way?
Mhm.
Fuck right off, frankly.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
there's no time for it, no need for that. And I can do so much more if you just
Yeah.
listen to what it is that I need and let me have it. I'm not
Mhm.
asking people to move the world. Like I just usually am
No.
asking, can I have some bullet points, please? Or can
Hmm.
I get up and walk away from my desk for a few minutes? Do you know, if that, well,
Hmm.
I've never had an issue with that myself, but they're typically what people will ask for. Like, and then, I mean, when it came to getting a diagnosis, this in itself, I know, is it. Let's try not to get infuriated, but when it came to get a diagnosis for her, um, I know rather than actually from the point where you got in front of somebody for a diagnosis, I know you went down a number of different routes beforehand to try and get
Mm.
solutions for her on the mental health side of things, and it's no secret that in Ireland we don't do so great on the mental health side of things. But walk me through some of the ups and downs of that, or what you did, the practicalities of it, what you
Yeah.
did.
So I suppose our first protocol was the doctor. And I think it summed up to about 6 or 7 doctor visits that we did throughout the whole process to try and figure out, was it depression? Was it hormonal? Was it being a teenager? Was it neurodiversity? Was it what could it have been? She was self-harming. She had suicidal tendencies. She wasn't sleeping well. She was lacking motivation. She was crying all the time. She wasn't going to school. She was having complete meltdowns, which now I know are neurodivergent burnouts. And she wasn't coping at all well with life day to day, just day to day in general. Just day to day, getting her breakfast, getting to school, getting out of the car when I bring her to school. None of that. She just couldn't do any of it. So we were back and forth to the doctor a few times. We eventually got a referral. She was in and out of her counsellor in school as well when she did go in.
Yeah.
We got a referral from the doctors to go to CAMS, and we went to CAMS, and we came away just completely broken from CAMS because the doctor who saw her was some kind of a psychiatrist, but like a triage psychiatrist. So he would evaluate the situation, take notes, and then refer back every Tuesday. They would meet up with the head psychologist and he'd refer back his notes. They would evaluate each of the notes from that week and decide who needed help and who didn't. Yeah. So during that meeting, there was comments from the doctor. I had, asked, could it be just that she's depressed? Could it be, this, that, and the other, and trying to kind of probe to see, whilst also trying to stay quiet because it's her appointment and he's trying to extract as much from her as he can to kind of get the overall picture. And I don't want to be kind of butting in because this is all alien to me.
Yeah.
But I did kind of probe a little bit as, depression and would antidepressants work and things like that to kind of bring her out of her funk. And he said, no, well, antidepressants would be, in very serious cases. And also she's a very beautiful girl and you tend to put on weight when you take antibiotics or antidepressants. So that was, for me, that blew me away. So I was speechless after that. And there was other kind of comments with regard to her behaviour being like a typical teen. Like she's just a moody teen. And that if she self-harmed going forward, that I should punish her harder, that I should take away her devices. Come down hard on her if she continued to do that. So obviously I didn't agree with any of this. I wasn't down for doing any of that. The only thing she had that brought her a bit of joy, he was telling me to take away. And she had minimal joy at that time. So we came away from there anyway, just absolutely distraught. So we went back to the doctor again, and then she had recommended we go to Pieta House. So we got a spot in Pieta House for 12 weeks, which ended up being, I think, 17 or 18 weeks in total because they extended it because they just felt she needed more. That was fantastic. I had to attend with her, so I'd stay in the waiting room while she went for her appointment, just in case anything flared up that I needed to know, whatever. Yeah. So she went to those, and the counsellor she had there, she clicked to it straight away, and she found them really beneficial. It didn't help her feel better overall, but it helped in the moment, so having those to kind of look forward to, having those coming up, did help. It gave her like just a week till she gets to the next one, and a week till she gets to the next one. She can get it all off her chest.
Proper emergency medical care for mental health as such, like.
Yes, for children, for mental health, for adolescents. And she was lucky to get in there because they're flat out, constantly flat out. And it came from the counsellor who had told me to collect her from school to take her to the doctor as an emergency because she was high risk suicide after what she had said to the counsellor. So that was our journey, I suppose, eventually. And then we went. Now she was kind of not really sleeping very well, and I couldn't get into school. She was in first year. She was hit and miss. She was okay kind of up until about Christmas in first year, and then it was just hit and miss. She missed 2/3 of the year, and then second year, then she missed all of April and all of May. She didn't attend one single day. I'd bring her to the school, she'd have a complete meltdown. There's absolutely no way I was getting her out of the car, and I'd have to bring her home. And oftentimes we'd drive to the school just to turn around the roundabout and drive back again because she'd say, no, absolutely not, I can't do it. So with that, then you got your diagnosis, and I made immediate plans when you had got your diagnosis and the validation you felt, and when you had started the medication and you immediately said, it's a game changer.
Bingo! Yes, bingo!
Finally. So,
And I know you've always found my diagnosis nearly harder emotionally than Grace's, and I know I'll explain it and give you a chance to kind of gather yourself, but I know that you said to me that it was because you could see the future she could have ended up with regards, obviously I'm awesome and I'm in a great place, that's a great future, but it's the bit in between. Like, I hated school and I struggled in the same way as she did. I was drop kicked out the door because it was the 80s, 90s, and there wasn't the same sort of support systems. There's not great ones now, but there was none of them then. But I struggled with the friendships, and I struggled with the peers, and I struggled with the social situations, and I struggled with the learning and all of those things. And you were always there the whole way through at my side, so you saw all of that from teens to 20s, and as an adult and as a parent, and all of those struggles. So I think it makes sense that you're now looking at your child and thinking, even though it probably is still late to get to her at 14, it was 14, wasn't it, when she was diagnosed?
Yeah. 14.
Even it's kind of feels late to get to her at 14 after being through the years that you had. It's still early versus like it's ahead of any the rest of secondary school, any parenting, any college, any of that kind of stuff then too. And I could see, I know you've always said you found it harder to stay, I was going to say sober, not the word, less emotional when you talk about mine, and I'm like, it's grand, let you do all that worrying. But it's difficult to look at it because you have a daughter, I have all boys. I don't know what it is. It doesn't affect me in the same way, and I think it's because I couldn't perceive of their future in the same way simply because they're guys and it's different for them anyway. But I've always felt connected to Grace in a way that never made sense till this. Now the two of us will often be in the kitchen with you and we'll be like rambling or talking about something and you're like, what are you doing? It's a whole other language. But I love it. It makes sense now as to why the two of us are so alike. And because you were my best supporter throughout all of those years, it came without question that you were going to be hers. But I just want to go back to you were talking about the experience with the doctors, and I remember a particular phrase that was used with you that I remember challenging you on. And when I look at it now, I think fair dues to you, because you don't go up against me very often, but you went up against me on this one. And it was the doctor had said to you that she is able to come home from school when she was stressing out or when she was having a meltdown or couldn't handle it. And you had created an environment at home that was her safe space. And we're not talking fluffy pillows and cuddles. We're talking home was somewhere where she could have her meltdown, where she could tear you a new arsehole for yourself, frankly, where she could speak openly about what a pain in the hole everybody else was and how the world didn't like her and how she felt about everything. And you had to take all these punches and act like you weren't impacted by it personally, which of course you were, but you made it that safe space for her, which is difficult to do. But that, I think it was that psychiatrist, it might have been a doctor, so correct me if I'm wrong, had said to you, you need to make it not as nice at home. And I remember you were absolutely fuming. I remember you ranted all the way around Fort Mountain, I think it was, we were walking, about what he had said. And I went against it. And I had said, well, because this was before I had my diagnosis and we even knew that was the path that we were on. But I remember saying to you, maybe it does need a bit of a firmer hand. And it's the first time that you and I went, and I only ever said it once, I never said it again, because you were damn right. And so it's a really long way of getting to like the question being, I think from the outside, one of the hardest things that I don't know if I could do would be to stand up against people like me about things like that. You know, when you've got someone who's like, we've been besties since you were born, but to stand up against somebody like that and say, no, this is, and certainly with a professional in a situation where you're supposed to trust them, and you're thinking, this is the only thing that I know that works, is I've created this safe environment, a psychologically safe environment for my child, and you're telling me to take it away, and you're on that cliff edge of, do I trust the professionals and the system?
Yeah.
Do I trust my instinct and my gut as her mother? Like, how does that work? Like, how do you make those decisions like that?
You wing it and you hope for the best.
It's so true. It must have been very lonely, I guess, for want of a better way of
Yeah.
putting it, without trying to make you cry. Like, but it had to be, because I know there was times where you're like, nobody else gets it, including
Mm.
me. Um, and even Grace didn't get it when you were
No,
supporting her then as well. Like,
it was
so you
difficult.
mentioned as well that you were doing the drive by at school every morning.
Yeah.
So, and I remember that you moved, excuse me, from, you used to work in veterinary and then you moved to working in insurance, and you wanted to climb the ladder in
Mm.
insurance. Now, doing something like that with all of this stuff going on at home, how did all of the stuff that's happening at home impact the work life, or did it?
It did. And just going back on your last point there, it was her teacher that said that I shouldn't make it so nice at home.
Was it? I couldn't remember who it was. I knew it was someone we didn't really rate.
Yeah, yeah. And again, for perspective, like, it was the teacher, the psychiatrists, the counselors, and then the teachers were all
Yeah.
we're all pulling against it. So you're kind of, it's like you have a rope around your waist and everybody is attached to the end of this rope and they're just pulling tighter and tighter.
Mm-hmm. And you have to stick to what you feel like as her mother. And I'm a parent, and I'm not going to lie, like, I don't know that I could do that when I'm pulled in so many places by so many professionals. And I mean, I have a second person I get to negotiate all these things with, so we rationalize it out together. But you were the mom and the dad in this situation, making all the decisions entirely alone. I know we sounded out a few of them together, but at the end of the day, if I told you to do something, it was your decision to do it,
Yeah.
not mine.
And it's difficult and it is lonely, and you're putting a lot of weight on your decision. So it's not like something you've talked out. We talked it out. We talked it inside and out, but you're putting a lot of weight on the final decision. And me, growing up, for me, I didn't put much weight in any of my decisions. I just kind of made decisions and rolled with them and hope for the best, go with the flow kind of thing. But in this instance, it was major. It was kind of life changing. It could have been detrimental to Grace's mental health and her life had I made the wrong decision and I'm sure I've made wrong decisions, obviously, as I go along. But that was one, always growing up, and my parenting up until a certain point was very much so, get up, dust yourself off and carry on. And that's how I was brought up. That's how you bring your boys up. That's how I was bringing Grace up. But suddenly then I had to change everything. I had to change absolutely everything that I knew about parenting, everything that I knew about my own upbringing, everything all of my friends do. Like, because you mirror, you copy, you take tips from everybody. And I had to pare it all right back to the bare bones. And I had to look at Grace, see what her needs were, because it's no point me parenting Grace how I would think she should be parented, or how I was parented, or how you parent, or how anyone else parents. I had to look at her and see how she needed to be parented. And that doesn't mean, she wants the iPad, she gets the iPad. She wants to stay up late, that's not what that means. That means that her needs needed to be met from me as a parent, and her support needed to be there from me as a parent. And that's what's important. I think we need to look at our kids. And you've multiple children, so even with multiple children, you have to parent them all differently.
Feels like millions, but yes, you're right. They're all. Oh my gosh, I never understood that. Like, I remember standing in the kitchen talking to Dad, and I was due my second baby, and I remember saying to him, like, I really love Rowan was my first.
Yeah.
Like, I really love Rowan. How in the hell am I going to find enough love for a second one? Like, how does this even
I remember, work?
And then they arrive, and they're polar opposites to each other, and one will take to being told off, or he's like, if he's disciplined, he'll just stop, and the other one, if he's disciplined, he'll just do 10 times worse. Like, so you're right, they need very different parents.
I think I'm lucky that it's just me and it's just her, so I don't have the other partner as such with conflicting ideas or conflicting ways of doing things. And I also don't have another child that I need to be fair with. So I could literally funnel, and I do take that as a kind of a blessing in disguise, but that I could just funnel everything into her and give her the best parent that she deserved.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to try and spread, like, trying to be a child's parent because of it, to meet the child's needs is one thing, but then trying to be fair to multiple children is a whole other ball game. No, thank you. So I am lucky that I only have one, and call it special needs, whatever you like to call it, but she had needs that I needed to meet in order for her to get the best parent from me. And I just don't know how I would have spread that or confronted another parent who had a say.
Yeah.
You get me? So like I was kind of in a prime position for her, not for me.
Yeah.
I was trying to get me nuts and absolutely wrecked and trying to pull from pillar to post, and like every decision I made, I didn't know if it was the right one. I didn't know if it was going to come back and bite me in 5 or 10 years' time. She turned into a horrible human because of the decisions I made when she was 14. So you're kind of in that kind of a spot now. I think I'm fairly comfortable that it's going well and she's turned into a decent human, but who knows really, like, but I just think, I do consider myself lucky, call it a silver lining, but I do consider myself in a good position that I could give her everything.
I think if you're going to fall out at this stage, it's not going to be because you didn't advocate for it and look after it. Then it'll be over something really trivial and stupid, and that's fine. We can all deal with that.
Like her hairbrush or her hair or something. Yeah.
Oh my god, something daft like the fringe. Then the education system. So this has been a riot. And I know I get, maybe it's because of my own experience, and I know you and I were very similar when we were in school. Neither one of us was considered ourselves particularly academic. Really good outside of school, really good socially, really good at hands-on things and doing those. And once she had her diagnosis, which was supposed to be the magic ticket to getting her back into school and getting her all of the things that she needed, how true is that about it being a golden ticket to all those things?
I don't know about a golden ticket, but it definitely opened up more space for her to have accommodations. And in Grace's case, she dropped 2 subjects that she was way behind in, felt completely overwhelmed, and she hated the class, she hated the teachers, just everything was gone wrong. So she dropped those 2 classes, not the end of the world, junior cert. And she got certain accommodations her accommodations were that the teacher wouldn't call on her. She just wanted to be left alone, just sit in a class. She'll do her work. She was very compliant in that regard. She'll do her work. She'll get on with it. She'll get good grades. But just leave her alone. Don't call her out in class. Don't, shine a light on her and put her near the back of the classroom so she can just be left alone. So in those cases, she got the accommodation she needed overall. And I would say 99% of the teachers did play ball with it, and they were all really supportive. And her report card at the end of third year was a huge change. She was in, like, her attendance improved by 100%. Like she was in bar being sick, genuinely sick with like COVID or something. She was in all the time. There was a couple of meltdowns here and there, but nothing major. She was in for the whole year, and her report card at the end of the year reflected that from the response of her teachers, because they were all just, it's great to see her, it's fantastic having her back, la la la, and they all played ball. There was one teacher who, we've spoken about this at length, but one teacher that didn't play ball all year. Thankfully she doesn't have her now, but she would call her out and she would put her up at the front of the class. And there was one instance that she moved the class around because we were doing a test, so Grace had plunked at the front of the class, so that test was a write-off. And then at the end of the test, Grace got back up and went to her seat at the back of the class. And as she was moving along, the teacher called her out for going back to her seat that she wasn't told she could, and asked if she really wanted to move in front of the class. And Grace said, yeah, because also Grace has undiagnosed high function autism. So if you ask her a question, she'll answer the question. She won't read between the lines. And the teacher was speaking between the lines. So at the end of that class, the teacher called Grace back, and I was waiting outside in the car park because it was her free class. So I would pick her up from school, but she called her back and the teacher confronted her about giving her cheek and not respecting her authority. With that, Grace said she hasn't respected. Grace had said that she didn't respect her accommodations that she had in place, and if she respected those accommodations, then there wouldn't be an issue. So the teacher wanted Grace to be compliant. She wanted Grace to apologise for the instance, and there was a bit of back and forth between the school and me, and ultimately I backed Grace, of course, and ultimately there was no apology given from Grace, because I feel that it had the teacher respected Grace's diagnosis and her accommodations that were in place by all of the teachers, there wouldn't even have been an altercation. And the fact that Grace stood at the front of the class and stood up for herself, but calmly and coolly, and she eventually said, look, my mom's waiting for me in the car park. I have to go. I'm not continuing this conversation. And she left the classroom, very cool, very calm, stood up for herself, no tears afterwards. She just, it is what it is. She did it, and I was so proud of her for doing that and sticking up for herself. And the school didn't agree. The same teacher who had said not to make her too comfortable at home had said that they don't encourage the girls to question authority or question the leadership. And I would completely agree with that. We should all be questioning authority and leadership if we think something's wrong, for sure.
I remember doing the little dancey dance when you told me that. Like, yeah. And I remember that being one of those pivotal moments where you're like, this is turning on its head.
Yes.
Like, this is a world away from the child, even a year earlier, a world away from where we thought things could end up.
Yeah.
And to where she is holding her own with somebody. And that's intimidating. I was always intimidated by my teachers in school, and I'd have died of death before I'd have confronted them about anything. So to hold her own, I mean, she's Grace. I always talk, be it in LinkedIn posts or being in interviews about Grace, teaches me a lot about boundaries. You know, she's taught me about boundaries with regards my working day, boundaries with regards doing stuff for people who aren't grateful for it, boundaries with regards respect. Because even though a lot of it is down to the ASD side of things, the principle is still the freaking same. Like, you know, she's absolutely right. And to be taught those things by 15-year-olds that I wish I knew when I was 15, and she's epic. Like, and it was so. I remember we use a phrase when we talk about these things sometimes when we say, you know, is it the rock that you want to die on as such? And I remember that being one of those conversations where you were like, I'm proudly going to die on this rock.
Yeah.
Behind her. Because all they had to do was support the accommodations, which are not unrealistic. They're very simple accommodations, but somebody wanted to go out and make a point. So you have to accept the consequences of your actions. What's that TikTok thing of the consequences? Oh, it's like they're coming. Anyway, here come the consequences. Remember things. You know the one I'm talking about, but it involves singing.
Yeah. And the same teachers teach our children of consequences. And this teacher in particular was trying to teach Grace consequences for her actions, but wasn't taking any responsibility herself for the consequences of her actions. So
you can't have it both ways. Like, and all the other teachers are fantastic. You know, once they have all the information and they know how to do it, they'll just deal with it. It's no different than any other child with any other need. Like,
and anything at the school that annoyed me, other than those few, you know, those little things that I'm sure everybody comes up against, but the school and the funding for school and the SNAs and the extra supports that the schools should have for people with ADHD and autism and all the other neurodivergents, is I had to collect Grace for the entirety of third year because because of her accommodation, she dropped 2 subjects. So for those subjects, she couldn't be left in the school unsupervised because she was in junior cycle. So I had to collect her. So I was working in an office, remote now, but I was working in an office for that full year, still am. But I had to come out of work, collect her from school, bring her home, and then we'd have a snack. She'd, you know, regulate herself, have a little rest, we'd have a chat, whatever, and then I'd bring her back at the end of that class. And some of those classes landed at lunchtime, so it was because we got a bit of lunch, whatever. But that kind of thing where your kid is not in the need for an SNA or extracurricular classes, but is in need of staying out of certain classes. There's no, like, I don't know if I was still working in the vets, I wouldn't have been able to collect her. No. Like, she would have had to walk home, and it's a good walk home.
Someone else to do it.
Or I would have had to rely on other people. Exactly. So working remotely, and the role I happened to be in for last year actually worked out really, really well. And I got the support and stuff and work that I needed to do it. And I was able to manage my day. But again, in that instance, I was very lucky. Not everybody is as lucky as that.
And you managed to somehow, in between all that, manage to get yourself promoted as well. So, I mean, as an outsider, I wouldn't say it didn't affect your work. It definitely made things more difficult on both sides. But you're hella stubborn, like, you know, you were going to make sure you're getting both things done. So I think it's important to acknowledge and call out that kudos, because you still managed to get promoted twice. You get promoted to regional as well. Yeah.
3 times
Yeah.
actually, if you include senior agent. But I think it's
See?
hard enough for women in the workplace to get promotions. And then you throw that in, and then you just,
Yeah.
oh, Christ alive, it's rock hard. But I don't
Yeah.
like. It was definitely the hardest years I've ever done in my entire life. But we got through it together as well, and I had your support, and you know, I have good family and good support for physical things like collecting and things like that. So I do kind of look at it like that. I have the support I needed, but geez, it was rock hard few years. Really, really was. Like, I'm
And she's
glad
in
things.
cycle now. You can stay in for the classes if she's not
Yeah,
taking them.
yeah, she can stay put now. Thank God, so she have to take her after school. It's good.
I feel like you hardly see it at all.
I think it was 6 times or something going to school every day.
Yeah. And then for just the day-to-day stuff, when, you know, there's going to be days where she's just feeling overwhelmed and she could start that day, or it could be during the day, like, what strategies or supports do you have in place, or do you find work for you when those kind of things happen, when you're managing your work and her school and her needs as well?
It's difficult because obviously when you're in, well, for me anyway, when I'm in work mode, I'm in work mode. And I'm concentrating on work, and I'm in professional Caroline mode, and I'm a team lead now, so I have a lot of people relying on me and querying things with me and coming to me looking for support. And then Grace will have a meltdown, or she'll have a bad morning, or whatever the case may be. And obviously she's my priority, but my brain finds it really difficult to switch. So then I get this kind of a guilt trip feeling then, because she feels like I'm neglecting her because I'm on a call in work, or I'm concentrating on responding to an email or whatever. None of that's important. Like, obviously she's most important. But I just find in the moment, I find it really hard to switch from one to the next. And it's not the reaction she's looking for. Like, she wants absolute support. And understandably, because she's, you know, in the height of something that's gone wrong for her. So I find them really difficult. But as time goes on, and as I see Grace day to day, she's coping with these things a lot better. Even she's on medication now since June 2023, and we've come a long way. She didn't want to take her medication at the weekends, and I found her mood slipped. She got really low and blue at the weekends. So from that to now, she knows that her medication regulates her. She knows that her medication helps her cope with everything that the life throws at her better. So we've come a long way in that she can realise now that the medication really helps day to day. So, because it's very hard, and you know this as well, it's very hard when somebody's acting out or behaving in a way that you know they just need to take their medication. It's very hard to say, are you taking your meds? It's like asking someone are they on their period when they're having a bad mood. Like, have you taken your meds? But you can't, like,
in my house, we have that, like, when both the boys were diagnosed, one of the things I said as we were coming home from diagnosis is that we have to have a free pass on asking you whether you've taken your medication or not. You have to promise me now that you're not going to absolutely murder me if I ask you. In the same way, my husband said that to me, because it was safer. Like, it was dangerous for him to ask, but if he said it, I had agreed to that. Now he asks me sometimes, and I'm like, everybody's an asshole. Fuck off, leave me alone. I don't want to do anything. And he's like, Jen, do you take your medication? And I instinctively want to just punch him in the face. But I go, no. I wouldn't take it, and I feel better. Because I promised I wouldn't do that. I promised that I wouldn't lose the plot. Because, like, ADHDers, like, you want us to take medication on a schedule.
I'm gonna laugh, like,
remember this stuff, and then remember that you've taken it, so you don't take it twice, because that's also a problem.
And then, like, Grace, as well with ADHD, if you tell her to do something, it's the last thing she wants to do. So you have to tread so carefully, because you could say, like, have you taken your meds today? And she's like, no, and that's it. Like, I'm not taking them now. And and that could be partly teenager as well. But I know, like, if you're the minute you're told to do it, it's like, nah, don't do it now.
It is funny though, having been on the other side of it now, because my boys were diagnosed after I was. So when I've got my 17-year-old, and he was like rummaging violently around the kitchen, like tossing stuff and dropping stuff on the floor and cursing out like it's his fault and stuff. And then I went, did you take your meds? And to see that same face where it's all red and they're like,
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
It is. You can see how funny it is on the other side. But as a general rule in our house, Gary doesn't ask. Sometimes he'll ask me to ask the boys because he doesn't believe they're not going to lose the plot when he asks them. And they won't. They never lose the plot with me, to be fair.
Yeah. And I put it to Grace actually one day that she was in good form, so I said, right, I'll say it now. She's in right form. We were chatting on the couch, and I was like, do you know some days that maybe you're in bad form, or you're feeling overwhelmed or whatever, you're dysregulated, and you haven't taken your meds? Like, how do I ask you if you've taken your meds, or how do I kind of nudge you to take your meds? And she was like, just don't. If I'm in bad form, I'm throwing things around the kitchen, and I'm in the height of it, don't ask me. Don't say a word. Don't do anything. Go away. I'll figure it out myself. And I was like, okay. I do that.
And she goes under the stairs to hide.
Yes.
Like,
rocking
because
back
when
and
you're
forth.
raging like that, like when I get like that and I'm raging, and I was this morning because I took mine late, I was running, and I don't take it when I run until afterwards. But I couldn't find my sports bra to run. Therefore, everybody in the world was the absolute devil. And then I found a different one, and I ran, and I did that, and then I took the meds, and then it was time to go out the door with the boys for school, and I had to walk the dog, and I couldn't find the lead, and then I had to turn the whole house upside down trying to find the lead, and cursed everybody out of it because I couldn't find it. And then I was going out the door, and I couldn't find, what was it then? Oh, car keys.
Ugh.
And I was like, and this time it wasn't my fault. I wasn't the one who put the lead away, because it's almost always my fault. But the few things I'm consistent with are where the dog lead goes and where the car key goes. So I was like absolutely raging. So the whole school drive was me in the car going, everybody's an asshole. Why can't I put shit back where it's supposed to go? I hate everyone. I hate the world. I love you. I love you.
Terrible.
Like,
so Jack and Heidi, like,
oh my God, like, and only they know, like, they just sit quietly in the car going, I even made Oliver come back to the car because he didn't say love you back to me. I made him come back. I was how angry I was. Come back to the car. And I opened the window and I said, I love you. And he's like, love you too.
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this kind of aggression when I love you.
I'm not sure if any of them had asked me in that moment if I'd taken my meds, how I might have reacted. See, it does, for me now that I understand and I have that agreement, it does actually help me wind my neck in. I do come down a little bit, but I don't know how I managed to do that, because honestly, the humour I was in this morning, but I got out as soon as the meds kicked in. I was like, okay, I'm grand. I feel calmer now. It's just that everything seems so big and noisy and loud and disorganized and like it's all against me until I do that, and then I'm like, okay, now I feel like I can think about
tipping point.
Where might those keys be? They actually end up being in my older ADHD son's pocket in work. Like, he doesn't even drive. He's got my car keys in his pocket. You know, that's the house I live in. But you know, I could sit down and think about where things might be rationally and find them, because I'm calmer, because there's not so much stuff going on all at once.
Yeah. Oh, Grace with her ADHD, it's inattentive ADHD. So a lot of it's internalized. So there's an awful lot of guilt and overthinking and that kind of situation goes on. So when she's in bad form and she needs to take her meds, and she could be chewing me out, and I'll just go, okay. She goes away, and then she immediately feels bad because she's just at me, but she's still angry with me for no reason. But she'd go away and it'll eat away at her because she's been mean to me, and I'm not doing that to deserve it. So she'd be mean to me, she'd go away and think about it, and that triggers her to go, oh, I need my meds.
Yeah. But it took a lot of time to find that kind of balance of what works. Like, that's what works in your house, and like say straight out asking in mine. I'm sure in other houses they just leave them on the table and walk away kind of thing, like, because it's
slowly.
And it's often assumed that we're cross, and I'm like, I'm not cross. I'm just overdone. Like, I'm over people. Everything, I'm overdone in every single way. The noises, the smells, everything around me is just too much. And that, that can happen at friggin' 7:30 in the morning when I'm 5 minutes out of bed. Yeah. You know, it's not something that only happens at the end of the day when I've had a long day. That's a normal normal person thing.
It's happening all the time. Like, when you're not on your meds, it's a constant flow of overwhelm. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the only thing that'll make it better. Like, Caroline, we've been going for the best part of an hour. And
wow.
I know. I feel like
You've
I
answered
could.
your questions of it.
I've got most of them. I've got the most of them we've kind of answered through the conversation anyway. But I have just one pop quiz one I want to throw at you that I like to throw at everybody that's not on the list, which is basically if you could add or change one thing about today that would make it better, what would it be?
That would make ADHD better or the world
No,
better?
your day better.
Oh, my day. Just
Yeah.
in general, like.
Yeah.
And like a change about today. God,
This
that's
is like, ooh, I like this.
oh. Something I could change about today to make my day better. That's a good one. It's really hard, although. I think I'd like. God, actually, that's really hard. One thing I could do today to make my day better. Keep it simple,
Not that
Carla.
you could do, something you would change or add. Anything you can change or add to your day that you think would make it better.
I was gonna say like time, like an extra couple of hours to my day, but I don't want any more time. I just want to log off. Like, but no, I think maybe a bit of sunshine because it's hot and sticky today, but it's windy and wintry looking, and I think sunshine just always helps me feel better about my life in general. And I think a bit of sunshine and
the whole world is better when there's sunshine. It doesn't even have to be hot sunshine. It needs to be bright. And the world is better.
Yeah, because it's just dreary and miserable today, and I just didn't like a bit of sunshine.
There you go.
That was fairly generic.
I'd love to be able to go, granted, after that, but obviously I
know, yeah. That'd be lovely.
about that. But you could be my sunshine. You make my day better all the time. Wow.
Ditto.
Thanks, Caroline. I'll see you at the weekend.
Okie dokie, bye.